Alright, so this is the final chapter of Project Nephilim, Cosmic Orgasm and the Strange Fate of Charles Thompson, chapter 5.
The closer I got to the Lord, it's like...
Alright. So my vacation days were up, so it was time to report back in for duty. When I got to the office, I was directed by the receptionist to meet with the now deputy director. When I arrived to his office, he advised me to take a seat and asked about what the hell happened with that small battle that transpired outside of my house, and was it true if I had briefly ventured out to Switzerland. I explained that I was outside of my house and was it true. I explained that I was just following a lead and that nothing had come of it. Then he said he thought that it was quite strange that I went all the way out there and found nothing. Nevertheless, he had a new assignment for me. He wanted me to follow up on finding out more on these obscure figures involved with the so-called powers that be, as I had deemed the title in my report from Roswell. He then advised me to go and interview the former deputy director in prison and that I was being assigned a partner. That's when a knock at the door became apparent. To my surprise, a man of very small stature walked in after the knock. He couldn't have been more than 3.5 feet in height. It was now quite obvious that he was indeed a midget. He introduced himself as Richard Smalls and that he didn't mind to go by Dick. Man, all I could think about was the irony of that name being a midget and how the kids at school growing up must have given him a hard time because of it. After a brief introduction, I introduced myself and we became acquainted. Then we headed out to the prison. On the ride there, I wanted to try some small talk, so I started up a conversation. Right away, he cut me off and stated that he knew what I was thinking and that I should not judge him based on his abnormality because I would soon find out that he was just as capable and effective as any other field agent. That's when he went into this big spiel about his genealogy, coming from a long line of small people that had all managed to become successful in their careers, and that the apple hadn't fallen far from the tree, being that his father was a decorated war hero standing at only 3 feet 6 inches. Supposedly in Nam, his father was awarded with an array of stars and hearts for saving his platoon in a battle after he had taken 5 bullets from a deranged gook, but had managed to kill Charlie as well as lead his team to safety in the midst of the chaos around them, being gunfire, explosions, and Agent Orange. Not too soon after this history lesson of Richard's family, we arrived at the prison. After a short venture, we walked into the interrogation room. Short venture through the prison. The former deputy director was sitting at a table with a guard by his side. As I was getting a feel for the room and how this was going to play out, I noticed a large skinhead with lightning bolts tattooed to his neck walk by the small window on the door and blow the former deputy director a kiss. As I witnessed that display of affection, I advised the guard to leave the room and the interrogation started. I see you're making friends, Director. He just rolled his eyes. So, Director, why did you do it? The same reason why anybody goes to the dark side, money. I sold my soul for 30 pieces of silver and now I have to meet my fate. So who's behind all of this? Look, Charles, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But in any case, I think I'll invoke my right to plead the fifth. You sure you want to play it that way? Abruptly, Richard motions his arm in front of me and stops me dead in my tracks. Then he begins to walk up to the former deputy director and starts to unzip his fly and begins to wiggle his pants until his junk flops out. What the fuck are you doing, Dick? Don't worry, Charles. Remember the story I told you about my dad? Well, he also specialized in interrogation during the war. This is a little trick he taught me. He then pulls out a pair of rubber-handled pliers and a blowtorch from his jacket and begins to light the ends of the metal on the pliers until it becomes scalding amber. Then he claps the pliers together a couple of times to display the power of the torture-rigged tool in his small hands. Looks like we're going to have some weenie ropes tonight. Charles, get this crazy midget away from me. Sorry, I can't do that, sir. He operates on his own accord. You can't be serious. Richard continues to clamp the pliers with his small hands, walking closer and closer to the former director. Okay, I give. He then explains that it's a man that lives in a mountain in Southern California. I have him write down the address and Richard lets him know that if this doesn't add up, he will be back for some roasted sausage. The former director just sits there with his junk hanging out of his pants looking like he just seen a ghost. Then Richard clamps the pliers a couple of more times. Remember, Director, weenie roast. So the scene now changes again. Before Richard and I headed out to SoCal, I needed to consult with an old friend. Since he no longer resided in the dimension I'm currently in, I figured the best way to get in contact with him was to visit this necromancer that worked underground, who also was a former lover of the late Dr. Winston. Her name was Shelley, supposedly after the famous author, and she was a bit of a character, to say the least. Outside, I let Richard know of my new objective. So I'm letting him know the details. He just shrugs his shoulders and tells me what the hell. And now that I mention it, he always was curious as to the truth behind paranormal stuff like that. I let him know that as far as conjuring of spirits, I've seen it once before my very own eyes. Once we reached Shelley's, the front door was open, so we enter her sanctuary of occult practices. As the door closes, a woman in a bejeweled robe enters the room, and upon noticing me, lights up with a big smile. Charlie, I didn't know you were going to show up with that handsome face around here. Then she begins to feel on my chest with one hand and the other on my arm. I see you've been working out, honey. As she finishes saying this, she looks down and begins to scream. What in the hell have you brought into my house? That's Richard, my partner. She grabs a broom leaning against the wall and begins to shoo Richard, hitting him with the bristles of the broom as if he's some kind of diseased animal. Get out of here, you dirty, no-good troll. You crazy bitch, quit hitting me with that damn broom. Shoo, shoo, I say. She continues hitting Richard with the bristles of the broom as each hit pushes him towards the door. I'm getting the hell out of here. You two are a bunch of nutballs. Richard slams the door shut and yells back, I'll be in the car ordering the plane tickets. Charles, why would you bring a mischievous little demon like that into my house? Look, Shelley, I didn't know you had a problem with small people. Now to the reason I've come. I need your help. Help? Don't you know those creatures are never to be trusted? Hell, who knows what he stole on his way out? Shelley, I need to see the doctor. My dear Thomas? Yes. Well, why didn't you say so? Shelley then takes me into a dark, windowless room filled with candles and incense burning. She begins to search for something on a shelf and finds a feather in a jar of a red substance. Then she begins to draw a circle on the floor with the feather, dipping it into the jar periodically, and directs me to enter the circle before it's closed. Once I enter, she begins to draw an inverted five-pointed star with all of the points touching the inside of the circle. After the pentagram is drawn, Shelley begins to speak in tongues. As she is rambling in her undiscernible language, a mist begins to rise from the ground and takes the form of a human being. Soon it's apparent that the doctor's soul has risen from the ashes. Ah, my dear Shelley, you look splendid. If I were in a tangible state, I'd make sweet love to you right here and now. The doctor begins to bark like a dog a couple of times, and Shelley follows his lead by meowing like a cat. Charles, is that you? I miss you, Professor. I miss you as well, my boy. Professor, since you left, I feel I have this deep void in my soul. I know, I'm sorry I left you, my boy. But I hear good things. I hear you found a nice lady and managed to marry her. She's great, Professor. She's a doctor of psychology like you. That's wonderful news, Charles. I cannot wait to meet her one day. She earned her doctorate with a thesis based on your work. Don't make me blush, Charles. I just wanted to let you know that I have one last thing to do and then I'm done with the Bureau and fighting the system from within. I regretfully have come to find out that it's beyond repair. I always knew you would realize the vanity of our cause sooner or later. Charles. Also, I wanted to tell you that for once in my life, I'm happy. Well, this is music to my ears, Charles. Looks like you finally made it out of the anus, my dear boy. I think I have. Mark my words, Charles. Pay attention now to how the universe will work in mysterious ways. Thank you, Professor. No, thank you, Charles. You have been one of my greatest joys in life to apprentice. The pleasure is all mine, Professor. Then it looks like my job here is all done. See you in the next world, Charles. Yeah, in the next world. Scene now changes again. Once Richard and I landed in SoCal, we catch a taxi and drive out into the desert until we reach this giant rocky mountain. As the former director wrote the directions, we find a secret door on the mountain and enter into a cave. Down a long dark hallway, we find a staircase that must go up at least 100 stories. As we finally get to the top of Richard periodically reminding me of his short stature and how he has shorter strides than me, we find a massive room filled with an enormous hoard of gold, precious diamonds, and ancient relics that I'm sure is the biggest, if not in the world, then by far is on this region of the globe. In the distance, I can see something hovering on its own axes. That resembles the Ark of the Covenant, so without further ado, we walk over to it. Out of intrigue, Richard reaches out his small hand, to touch it, but I stop him and advise him that if you touch it, you will get electrocuted. Then I bend down and find a switch extending outside of the ark and tap it with the rubber bottoms of my shoes, and the ark collapses to the ground. You ready to see what's inside? I grab the top portion of it and begin to lift it when I'm interrupted by a gnome-looking man of very small stature with a long, scruffy beard and pointy hat, yielding a Roman spear in his hand, walking down a pile of gold. Hold it, fellas. What do you think you're doing? Oh, that's right. You must be Agent Thompson, and if I'm not mistaken, his name is Dick Smalls, and you are him. Yes, I suppose I am. So what? You want to know why, is that right? That's why we're here. The gnome-like man makes a sigh. It all started when I was a kid. You see, I got picked on when I was a kid. Not just because I had the same kind of name as Dick over there, and more importantly, because of my size. That's how my misanthropic views on humanity began. It also was a blessing, I suppose, because the bullying drove my determination to make something of myself, and that's exactly what I did. At the time, I became an archaeologist, and some years ago I was completing some research on a lost treasure that was supposed to be once the possession of the Knights Templars. And it brought me here. And once I laid my eyes on all of this, I knew with such clarity what my destiny in life was to be. You know, they used to rule with an iron fist, but now everything in its civilized culture is ruled by lobbying, and lobbying paves the way for greed to run its course. That's right. Greed is what makes the world spin round and round, and greed is the reason that I still am in power today. And because I have the biggest nest egg, the world spins to the tune of my greedy desires. It's tyrannical economics 101. Oh, and speaking of who runs the world, Agent Thompson, I heard about your excursion with Lucy Fur. The gnome-looking man of small stature sticks the Roman spear between his legs and starts making a humping gesture. Richard then grabs a golden sword from one of the piles of treasure and challenges him to a duel. In a matter of seconds, they begin to clash back and forth as the two men of minute stature fight with the weapons that are proportionally way bigger than them both. After going back and forth like this for a while, Richard manages to knock the spear out of the gnome-like man's hands with the sword and stabs him right in his abdomen. As the gnome-like man falls to the ground laying in a pool of blood, he gasps his last words. It's all in vain anyways. Shortly after, his eyes close and he's gone. I don't know if I can actually believe what I just saw, even after everything I've been through, but one thing is certain, I'm done with this shit. That's when I begin to walk away. As I'm walking away, I pass a dead gnome and notice a shard missing out of the spear's handle. Are you going to call this in, Charles? Nope, but I'm out of here. How about you? As I see Dick lying on a pile of gold, he responds, I think I'll stay here for a while and contemplate what I'm going to do next with my life. Suit yourself, bud. The scene now changes again. Back at home, Sandy was waiting for me, and as we embraced each other, I decided to break the news to her about my decision for early retirement. As always, she was happy for me, for a chance for us to spend more time together. Then a surprise knock hit the door, and as I opened it, young Thomas and some girls stood at the doorstep. He introduced her and stated that he was in fact for a period of time on another planet outside this galaxy, but had managed to commandeer a spacecraft and make it back here by shooting through a wormhole. He also explained that his new girlfriend was in fact an extraterrestrial, but that no one would know because she could change her genetic structure and appear as just an everyday human, and that despite their ages, they were committed to each other for better or worse. So all in all, I guess everything had worked out for the better. With that being said, I finally learned how to appreciate the adversities I had went through in life, because it had brought me this beautiful family and caused me to become the person that I am today. Last but not least, I finally escaped out of the depths of the aliens complex after all. Thanks be to God that I was not a hopeless soul. And that is the end. I hope you enjoyed Project and Film.